back for another day of Read Along with Alane. We are reading from The Blue Witch, and this week we are wearing jerseys from our favorite teams. And okay, I happen to like the Raiders, okay, and I'm really excited for them to move to Las Vegas next year. So today, before we get started, I've got a nice shout out, all right? Take a look at this sneevel that young Mr. Connor sent me from Hendersonville, Tennessee. So Connor, if you are listening, Miss Elaine is really impressed with your drawing skills. So guys, if you have your sneevel that you want to send me, don't hesitate to scan it, email it, or even mail it to me, all right? Okay, so where are we? We left off with chapter 12, and do you remember what happened? Hugo and Abigail were out in the gardens talking when Indira and her friends came running along, and they tried to hide from them, and then boom, they fell right through some broken boards into some big hole in the ground, right? And Indira says, oh, I guess you guys are stuck here, bye-bye, and she just leaves them there, right? So we're going to pick up with chapter 13, which is being told from Abigail's point of view. So here we go. Steam came out of Abigail's ears. The nerve of the girl, leaving them down here like that. When I get out of these dungeons, I'm going to settle things with Indira once and for all, she swore. Once with a punch to her snotty nose, and for all with a kick to the shins. Never mind, Indira, Hugo said. We have to find a way out of here. They looked around the chamber. There wasn't much besides stacks of empty wooden crates. A mound of old shields gathered dust in the corner. A skittering sound made Hugo jump closer to her. What was that? He asked. Probably a legion of Wraithos, she teased. Any ideas how to escape? We could stack those crates up and climb out, he said. Abigail eyed the crates. Good idea, but there aren't enough of them to get close to the ceiling, even if I stood on your shoulders. There must be a door. She shoved aside some of the crates and nearly cheered at the oval outline revealed. See? Help me move these. Hugo shoved and Abigail pushed, and together they moved the crates away, revealing an ancient wooden door. It had an iron ring for a handle. Hugo tugged on it. It's stuck, he said. Abigail grasped the handle, and Hugo braced one leg on the wall for leverage, but still it didn't budge. Abigail studied it. There are no hinges. So, she put her shoulder against it and pushed hard. With a pop, the door came unstuck, and she tumbled into the corridor. Hugo slapped his forehead. It opens outward. Good thinking, Abigail. You'd make a fine scientist. But Abigail was hurriedly backing up. Hugo, we have a problem. What? Hugo peered around her and squeaked in horror. The hallway was crawling with Wraithos. Their king-sized rodent bodies bristled with matted fur, eyes glittering hungrily in the dim light. The closest one bared pointy teeth, rising on its meaty back legs to hiss at them. Abigail, do something, Hugo said, looking pasty gray. We have to get past, Abigail said. I can try my witchfire, but there's a lot of them. I could use some help. Wait here. Hugo ran into the storage room, returning with a pair of rusty shields. I'll scare them while you blast them. On the count of 3. 1, 2. On 3, Hugo began banging the metal discs together. As Abigail released her crackling witchfire. It came easily now that she had mastered it, and she enjoyed the feel of the blue fire flowing from her fingertips. The vermin quickly scattered, diving into cracks and crevices in the wall. Hugo sighed with relief. I really don't like those things. Let's get out of here. They studied the dimly lit corridor. It was built out of stone blocks. Heavy wooden doors lined either side. Each had a small window inset with iron bars. Burned-out torches rested in notches every few feet. The air was cold and musty, as if no one had been down here in eons. Do you think anyone's inside these cells? He whispered. Madame Vex said they haven't been used in centuries. Abigail hopped up and grabbed the bars at the first door, pulling her face to the opening. Scattered straw covered the ground. A set of rusted chains trailed from the wall, ending in manacles. Empty, she said, jumping down. They took turns checking every cell. Hugo, do you think Jasper's right, that my mother was this Lysandra? Abigail asked. Maybe. Hugo jumped down as they walked to the next cell. It would explain why Melistra said she was a traitor. Jasper said Lysandra was running away from the coven with her baby. Abigail checked the next cell and then jumped down. But why would she want to leave? A Tarkana witch has never left the coven. Hugo shrugged. How did she die? Abigail blinked. I don't know. No one ever said, and I didn't think to ask. They continued until they made it to the end of the hallway. There was only one cell left. Abigail pulled herself up and peered inside. Besides the scattered hay, there was an old bucket and the bones of a long, dead Wraithos. About to tell Hugo it was deserted, she squealed when a furry green creature moved out of the shadows and sat down on its haunches. It was the oddest looking thing she had seen. It must have been double-jointed because its knees went up to its ears, which were long and drooping, hanging down past its shoulders. Ignoring her, it started calmly chewing on its own toenail. There's something in there, Abigail whispered to Hugo. Talk to it. Find out who it is. Abigail cleared her throat. Hello there. Who are you? The creature paused its chewing to ask, Who are you? I asked you first, she said. I asked you second, and 2 is greater than 1, he answered snappily and went back to chewing on his toenail. Frustrated, Abigail hopped down. Well, Hugo asked. It's an annoying little pest. It spoke utter nonsense to me. You try. Hugo dragged an old bucket up, and they both perched on it. The creature was busily examining its toes one by one, and then delicately nibbling on them. Hello, Hugo shouted. Can you understand me? The creature slowly lowered its leg, raising large, almond-shaped eyes to look at them. I assure you, child, my ears, he flapped them, are working quite perfectly. Hugo looked at Abigail for guidance, and she gave him a nudge to go on. I'm Hugo, and this is Abigail. The creature bowed its head. I am Fetch. How kind of you to pay me a visit. He sounds intelligent, Abigail whispered to Hugo. Ask him if he knows the way out. We're trapped down here, Mr. Fetch, sir. Do you know how we can get out? Fetch laughed, rolling from side to side on the floor, as if it were the funniest thing he had ever heard. He finally stopped, sitting up to wipe tears from his eyes. Boy, if I knew that, I would have shaken this place days ago. The food is abominable. He gave a visible shudder, and his furry green face turned a shade of purple. What did you do to end up here? Hugo asked. My master, His Highest, sent me to look around. You're Odin's spy, Abigail said, recalling Hystera's words. You're the one Jasper's looking for, Hugo said at the same time. Fetch lowered his head. Indeed, you are both correct. I'm afraid Jasper is in for a long wait. Hystera has vowed to remove my head. Then we have to get you out of here, Abigail said. Hugo turned to look at her. Use your magic to open the door. They jumped down. Hugo stepped to the side as Abigail shook out her hands and planted one foot. She took a deep breath. Fine Quinta, she whispered. A familiar tingle ran down her arm as she flung her hands out. Blue fire sprang from her fingertips and blasted the hasp of the iron lock that hung on the door. It blew red, and then the hasp blew and tumbled to the ground. Fetch crouched on the other side. No time to waste. Let's make haste, he said, nimbly brushing past them and running up the steps on his spindly legs. Abigail and Hugo quickly followed. At the top of the stairs, the corridor split into a forked path. Which way? Hugo asked. Fetch sniffed the air and pointed left. This way. They ran down the corridor, but as they came around a corner, muffled footsteps echoed ahead of them. Fetch pulled them into the dark shadows of a small alcove carved into the rocks. They pressed themselves into the wall as the swish of skirts grew louder. This green pest will answer my questions or lose his head this very day, Hystera's shrill voice demanded. Yes, madam. The deep male voice sounded like one of the Balfin guards. A sword rasped as he drew it out of his sheath. The pair passed by without seeing them. When the corridor was clear, they began to run. Behind them, a high-pitched scream of rage echoed as Hystera discovered her captive was gone. They burst out of the dungeons into an outer corridor. Fortunately, no one was about, but Abigail was still in the middle of the Tarkana fortress with a Balfin boy and a furry green creature to hide. She tried to think. They couldn't get to the gardens without crossing the wide open courtyard in front of the classrooms. This way, she said, veering away toward the stables. They snuck into the back door of the barn. A couple of Balfin groomsmen were hitching a pair of horses to a wagon piled with rotting kitchen garbage. Another flung a tarp over the pile to hold it in place. I've got an idea, Abigail whispered. You two hide in the compost wagon, then jump out when it's outside the fortress. I have to get back to my room before Indira tells Madame Vex we were down there. You want us to climb in that? Hugo asked, eyeing the smelly heap. Unless you have a better plan. Hugo shook his head. Fetch put one soft, furry hand on her cheek. Nice indeed, Abigail Tarkana, to see you again. Again? But I've never met you before. The funny little creature just nodded. They waited until the other groomsmen cleared out. Fetch and Hugo ran behind the wagon and climbed under the top. Abigail sighed with relief. Now she had to hurry back to her room and hope she wasn't spotted. She slipped down the corridor, hugging the wall and keeping to the shadows. When she reached the dormitory, she hurried around back and quickly climbed the ivy hand over hand, tumbling into a room in an exhausted heap. For once, not having any nosy roommates came in handy. Quickly shrugging off her torn and dirty clothes, she tied them in a bundle and hid them under her mattress. Next, she put on a clean uniform, brushed her hair, and braided it into neat pigtails. She sat down on the edge of her bed and opened her book on potent potions. Her heart was beating fast, but she sat quietly. She turned the pages slowly, pretending to read, when the thundering sound of feet signaled visitors. The door to her dorm flew open. Madame Vex stood in the doorway, eyes blazing. Indira and Nellie peered out from behind her. Glorian caught up, red-faced and puffing for air. "Hello, Madame Vex," Abigail said sweetly. "Whatever is the matter?" "You?" The headmistress looked confused to see Abigail sitting calmly on her bed. "I heard you were in the dungeons." Abigail frowned. "The dungeons are off limits. I remember you telling us that on the first day. I'm sorry I went into the swamps last week, and Dara was being so mean. I just had to get away." A tear escaped down her cheek. "But I learned my lesson. I've been here in my room studying for potions class all afternoon." "Liar! I saw you," Indira snarled. Abigail blinked, keeping her face innocent. "I don't see how that's possible. Or perhaps it was you who was in the dungeons. Where were you all afternoon, Indira?" Indira gawked at her. "She's lying," Nellie said. "I saw her at the bottom of a hole. She fell in a secret entrance with that Balfin boy she's always hanging around." "Yeah," Glorian added, "we can prove it." "You mean prove you know where there's another entrance to the dungeons?" Abigail asked. "I'm sure Madame Vex will want to know exactly where it is and what you were doing there. Unless, of course, you were just making it up to get me into trouble." She smiled sweetly at Indira and then went back to reading her book. "Well," Madame Vex said, looking from her to Indira, "is there a secret entrance or not?" Indira opened her mouth and then closed it. Without another word, she shoved past Nellie and Glorian and left. Abigail thought Madame Vex was going to pop a vessel. "Indira Tarkana, do not walk away from me. It will be detention for you every day for a month." She gave one last look at Abigail, then snorted her disgust and slammed the door. Well, that was the end of chapter 13. I have to admit, it was literally one of my favorite chapters. I love how Hugo and Abigail are looking in the dungeons, trying to escape this army of Wraithos, and they come across this furry little green creature. Turns out his name is Fetch, and he is Odin's spy, and he's also the furry little green creature that Jasper has them looking for. And so they manage to escape and run for their lives, and then Abigail sends them off in a wagon filled with trash so they can get out of the Tarkana fortress. And then I love how she turns the tables on Indira and gets her into trouble for trying to tattle on her. So really, really fun chapter. So I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. All right, guys. Well, that's it for today. In the meantime, before we come back tomorrow, you guys know the drill. All you got to do is click the link in the description of the video, and you will find all the fun worksheets for every chapter that we've read so far. So do them and send them in to me if you'd like. I'll show them on my YouTube channel like I did for Connor. And otherwise, I want you guys to get outside, have some fun, stay well, stay healthy, stay happy, and Miss Alane will be back tomorrow, all right? Alane out, guys.